Today, I'd like to continue our series on the book Undoing the Knots by Maureen O'Connell, and this is part 13 of a series of presentations on her book, and we're at this point into chapter 2 of her presentation. And in terms of the history, what's happening in Pennsylvania at this time and in Philadelphia, we see a lot of growth. For example, from 1830 to 1850, Maureen notes, the Irish population in Philadelphia went from 35,000 to 170,000. So you can see the huge increase in such a short period of time, that 20 years. So to kind of help the people to continue their sense of Catholic identity, the church developed the parochial school system. And that parochial school system had the effect of insulating white students from black students. Was that the intent of the system? It doesn't seem to be. The intent seemed to be to have an effective way to pass on the faith to the children. But really, when you think about it, this insulation of the children was not a very good thing because of the negative effects that happen. No real mixing and getting to know the black children. The police force at this time too became more and more Irish, and the idea of the police, it seemed to have a real tone of anti-blackness to it, where the black citizenry were really treated in a very harsh way by the Irish Catholics in the police department. Repeal societies at this time were encouraged to reject slavery. The idea was, let's not have this slavery. It's a terrible thing, and look what it's doing to people. It's dehumanizing them, treating them like property. Let's do away with it. Let's forget about this slavery. It's a terrible thing. But many were split on this issue. It wasn't a universal embrace of repeal. And really, a lot of people said, well, blacks really are inferior and they should remain slaves. So the sense of whites being better than blacks really took hold in the population. And this idea of looking down upon black people really spread at this time. And oppression in America was pretty much centered on race. If you were black, you were considered differently than if you were white, and you were treated differently, and you were thought of differently. And it was okay to oppress the blacks. Not okay to oppress the whites, but okay to oppress the blacks. So you can see the double standard here entering in. Between 1834 and 1849, for example, at the same time when this Irish population was growing, there were 9 major mob attacks against black citizens of Philadelphia. So you can see that the blacks were being targeted by the whites, and of course, the increasing number of whites were Irish Catholics. Daniel O'Connell, the great Irish liberator, when he heard about this and when he visited America and he actually saw this firsthand, said, where were the priests? Why weren't the priests speaking out against this? Why were the priests allowing this? Why was the church allowing this? What's happening here? This is obviously something that's wrong. Black citizenry being attacked, blacks being treated as inferior to whites, blacks not given equal opportunities. This is wrong. We should be in alliance with our black brothers and sisters. We experienced the same thing in Ireland with the British. Now, are we going to perpetuate this in America? This is wrong. But unfortunately, Daniel O'Connell was not listened to by the majority of the Irish. Now, where were the priests? A good question that O'Connell posed. One of the answers is the role of the bishop. Bishop at this time in Philadelphia was Francis Patrick Kenrick. He became the Bishop of Philadelphia in 1842, so he was a witness to some of these mob attacks on blacks. And his brother Peter was the Bishop of St. Louis, and he was a slave owner. So you can see slavery was kind of accepted in this family, the Kenrick family. Pope Gregory the 16th banned the global slave trade in 1839 in a letter called Supremo Apostolatus. And he said, we can't have this. This is wrong. You can't bring people from Africa and enslave them from other areas and treat them like property. This is wrong. They are our brothers and sisters in Christ. What are we doing here? This is immoral. Interesting, though, how this was interpreted. He banned the slave trade. So many took it who were in favor of slavery, that, okay, the slave trade is wrong, but slavery is okay. Now, how you can make that distinction, we look at it and say, come on, this is crazy. I mean, he banned the slave trade. Why? Because of the way black people were being treated. Certainly implied in that is the banning of slavery, but unfortunately it was not taken that way. And the American capitalist system was really tied up with slavery. One of the things that some people don't realize is that enslaved persons were the most valuable commodity in America before the Civil War. The black slaves exceeded the wealth of all the railroads and all the factories in the nation at that time. So this was a huge economic component of the American capitalist system. The wealth that was involved, the money that it would take to purchase a slave, and then, of course, waiting for the return, waiting sometimes years for the return on that money. So much capital was tied up in the slave trade. So when Pope Gregory the 16th condemned it and banned the slave trade, they would say, well, that's fine for him to say that, but all our money is tied up. What are we going to do? Are we going to lose all this money? This isn't good for us. We can't do this. So Bishop Kenrick wrote a moral theology, and his moral theology justified slavery. He was a great apologist for slavery, saying slavery was acceptable. Even though the Pope had banned the slave trade, he said, well, that's one thing, but slavery, it's part of our system. It's good. We need it. We need it to create wealth that provides jobs and opportunity for our people. And so he was a defender, even though he was bishop in Philadelphia, and might think, well, he's in the north, he's going to have it didn't matter. He was like saying slavery was okay. He was justifying slavery. And he went a little bit further than that. He said, if you're a Catholic slave owner, you would have to baptize your slave, even if it was against their will. You were baptizing them for their own good. And again, they were considered inferior. So the idea was, yeah, you can baptize them. So you can see the problem that this created for Catholics, because this is the way the bishop in Philadelphia was leading them.